Eileen, we're ready.
Okay. Good morning and welcome to the New Jersey Family Support Planning Council's very first virtual statewide meeting. I'm Eileen Hurley, I'm the chairperson, and Gabrielle Bohon is our vice chair. We welcome you in these trying times. We're just trying to stay connected this way. Just a little bit about our councils. In accordance with the 1993 Family Support Act, we formed the Family Support Planning. We have 10 regional councils that represent people individuals with disabilities and their families throughout the state. And we're all volunteers, and we're all just having the same goal to support each other and to advocate for our loved ones. So you could visit our Facebook page and check out where our local meeting is, and we are still having virtual meetings throughout the pandemic crisis. So today our agenda is Welcome to the New Normal, and we are really pleased to have some wonderful people speaking today. We have Paul Aronsohn, our Ombudsman. We have Mercedes Witowsky, the Executive Director of the New Jersey Council on Developmental Disabilities. And we have Colleen McLaughlin and from Boggs Center discussing charting the LifeCourse with Tricia, Brennan from DVD. So we have a very wide agenda here, and I think we should just get started. So I'm pleased to introduce Paul Aronsohn. He is our very first ombudsman for people with developmental disabilities and their families. He was appointed by Governor Murphy in April of 2018, and we're very, very happy to have him representing us, and just very open to our any kind of problem we may have. He's very open to helping us, and we really are very appreciative of that. So, Paul.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much for that really warm introduction. Thanks to everybody. First of all, let me just say, I know the sound is a little bit off today, so if you can't hear me, I'm going to ask Mercedes. You can text me and let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to assume everything's good. I think I have about 15 minutes this morning, and I've got my timer here to keep me on track. But I'm really excited to be here, be with all of you virtually, if nothing else. I am the state's first ombudsman for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which is a mouthful of a title, but it's a really important office. And what I want to do today in the limited time we have is, I assume most of you know what our office does, and we've had an opportunity to work together. I'm just going to give a quick overview of who we are and what we do. Talk a little bit about what we've been doing over the last 3 months during the pandemic, and a little bit about our annual report, which I hope will be coming out very shortly. So our office was created by the state legislature in December of 2017, signed into law by Governor Christie in January of 2018, and I was appointed by Governor Murphy in April 2018. So we're a little bit over 2 years old. And it's an office that was born out of the recognition by folks in the legislature that our system of services and supports for children and adults is great in many respects, but it's very complicated, and there are gaps, and families often need an extra sort of helping hand, if you will, and there's definitely room for improvement. And so what they did is they created this office, and they basically made it so we're a resource. We're a resource for individuals, we're a resource for families, and again, we work with folks across the entire lifespan, from birth throughout. And our office is independent. We're technically in the Treasury Department. We get our emails and our paychecks through Treasury. But other than that, we report up through the governor. And that's important for really two reasons. One is because we're not really in a department, we're not constrained by some of the sort of bureaucratic sort of whatever protocols, if you will. We have a little more latitude, a little more flexibility to work with individuals and families. And second, and very, very importantly, it recognizes that the issues that affect people with disabilities, like the issues that affect everyone, don't just reside in one department. It's not just about human services or children and families, it's education, it's healthcare, it's public safety, it's transportation. And so this office has system-wide perspective, not just on the state level, but we work with our partners throughout counties and municipalities and stuff. So the way they set it up was smart, I think, and gives us a lot of ability to work most effectively, again, with individuals. We physically have an office in Department of Community Affairs. I think just because there was some available real estate there, some extra offices and cubicles. But most of the time, as many of you know, we sort of take the show on the road. And I've spent the better part of 2 years traveling the state, meeting with individuals and families where they live, where they work, where they go to school, where they socialize. And it really is an incredible opportunity because it gives us the chance to sort of have a different perspective, right? We get to see the lives you're living and the challenges you're facing up close and personal. And we're able to not only work with you most effectively, but also to share those insights and that perspective with our colleagues throughout state government and the larger disability community. As many as you know, for the first almost 2 years of the office's existence, it was a one-person show. I was covering the state by myself, but I'm glad to say that as of mid-February, we're now a two-person show. I'm joined by Christine Bachter, who I hope some of you have met, if not in person, at least virtually. She's our associate director. And both Christine and I came to this job both with professional and personal experience. For myself, professionally, I've been involved in a lot of different disability organizations. When I was mayor of my town in Ridgewood and Bergen County, and as a councilman, I did a lot of work locally with families, disability. But my biggest credential, my biggest qualification is that I come from a family with disability. In my case, I'm a sibling. All three of my siblings have had a mix of disabilities and healthcare challenges, but it was really through my sister Patty, and many of you have heard me speak about Patty. She's my older sister, and she had developmental disabilities. And so it was really through her and my mom's experience as her caregiver that I really learned about disability, became passionate about disability. And so I'm here. Christine also has both professional and personal background. Professionally, most recently, she was with NAMI's Mercer chapter for several years. And she's also done a lot of work with respect to autism, primarily through Autism Speaks. Christine is a mother of now a 22-year-old young man who's on the spectrum. And so the two of us come at this with a personal perspective. And for us, this is and continues to be a real labor of love for us. So the work of our office really is in three buckets. One is we serve often as a troubleshooter for individuals and families who are kind of lost in the system or just have a random question. Could be a series of questions, a series of issues. They're getting decisions back from the state that they don't agree with. Our job is to sort of work with them and try to help get them to where they need to be. Sometimes we deal with one issue with the family. Sometimes there's some families I've been working with, on a different set of issues throughout my 2 years in this job. The second bucket is we work with individuals and families to try to improve the system, to make it more user-friendly, more accessible, really taking that perspective and the experience of individuals and families and trying to use that to help inform the policymaking process. And then the third bucket, which is really overarching and extremely important, is we do our best to help make sure that the voice of individuals and the voice of families is heard, and that it's heard in a meaningful way on issues that not only directly impact them and their families, but also, impact the larger sort of disability community by making sure that the individuals and families have a seat at the policymaking table. Now, in the context of the COVID pandemic, we've been sort of drawing on all three buckets, if you will, pretty much nonstop. And what we've been doing is really trying to be a resource first and foremost for families when they have a question, when there are a lot of concerns obviously out there about the virus itself, and as well as what the implications are for some of the decisions that are being made relative to their lives going forward. So we've been really trying to serve as a conduit, trying to share their perspective, share their concerns with the policymakers in DDD as well as the Children's System of Care, but also we've done a lot of work with the Department of Education, the Department of Health, and working very closely over the last several weeks with the governor's front office, trying to make sure that they understood what are the issues that are impacting people. And that also relates to the second bucket, trying to, and the third bucket, trying to make sure that, what we're hearing from individuals sort of on a grassroots level is, being used to inform policies that are being made. And while that's always important, it's been particularly important now because this is all new to us. And the folks that are making policy, in DDD and CSOC and other places, just like the rest of us, they're dealing with this pandemic for the first time. And so there's such a, the insights that we get from individuals and families on a daily basis are just invaluable, and it really helps shape policy. I can think of three policies in particular that they have affected. One is the hospital visitation policy, and we work very closely, Christine and I, with our, a lot of our partners in the disability community, but particularly folks at the Council on Developmental Disabilities and Mercedes in particular, and Kyoko, trying to sort of make sure that the voice of individuals and families was heard on the hospital visitation policy. And I think Kyoko sent me over 100 letters to the governor that we helped facilitate and get to the governor's office. And the policy that came out was a very good one. And I think we are one of the few states actually to have a hospital visitation policy that allowed individuals to have a caregiver, a family member, a staff member, somebody accompany them in the hospital, which is, we all know, very important. Another policy that was really impacted by advocacy and working with individuals and families was the policy that came out from the Department of Health concerning the allocation of critical resources. As some of you probably remember, earlier on in the pandemic, there was a real concern about rationing care. What if there's only a few hospital beds left, or critical ICU beds or ventilators? And so we worked very closely with folks in the disability community, many of you, as well as colleagues in the Department of Health and the governor's office, to come out with a policy that I think makes good sense. And most recently, yesterday, the governor announced a policy with respect to the extended school year for students with disabilities. And Christine and I have been working very closely with our colleagues in the governor's front office and Department of Education, sharing the input we were getting from families, and I think it went a long way towards informing that policy and getting the governor to announce it yesterday during his press briefing. So I'm looking at my time. I got 5 minutes left here. Wanted to talk a little bit about my annual report. In fact, when we were going to have this meeting in person back in March, I was supposed to talk about the annual report because it was supposed to be out by then. We actually submitted it for internal review in mid-February, but because of the pandemic, everything, like a lot of things, got put on hold. And I'm hoping to be able to release the report this year. But the report is important, and I don't know if how many of you saw last year's report. I tried to really use it as a platform and to give voice to the concerns and issues that all of you raise. A lot of times when people read my report last year, family members, they'd say, yeah, of course, nothing new here. But for, I think, policymakers and legislators and others that are particularly, I think it can be a useful tool. And so I try to use it as a platform, if you will, to address systemic issues that need to be addressed, as well as specific issues. For better or for worse, last year's report was about 17 pages. This one is, I think, a little over 40 pages. But I did put a table of contents in there with hyperlinks to make it easy. But, at some point, and I can take some questions now. We don't have much time, but I'd love an opportunity to talk with all of you, collectively or individually about the report. I think it's important for two reasons. One is I think it's an opportunity, again, for policymakers to sort of learn about some of the issues that are affecting individuals and families throughout our system. And two, I try to use it, not just for legislators and policymakers, but for anyone who's potentially interested in our issues, because I'm a big believer that either we all have someone with an intellectual and developmental disability in our family, or we know someone who does. I think it's important that we're very familiar with the issues and challenges, as well as the opportunities that our community faces. So with that, I think I've got a couple more minutes left. I don't know if you want me to take some questions, or I don't know if Kyoko's going to tell me the questions, or Eileen, or I can keep talking.
Let me unmute myself, Paul. Thank you so much. We had something. What was the governor's announcement? I guess it's a clarification on the governor's announcement for school-age children.
Yeah, so yesterday he announced our policy, which is similar to the one that Governor Cuomo announced in New York, which basically says that local school districts can do in-person teaching this summer. And that's very important for many of our families. You know, while it's been challenging for all students to do this distance learning, it's been particularly challenging for many of our students. And to get some in-person education over the summer, I think would be critical.
Right, and I think that I was reading that that families are very, very anxious to get their kids back, especially those that have missed 3 months, stressing and so on. So I guess this is a really big deal. And it's also a big deal for the adults. And we're working on it, right? So,
yeah.
Anyone else have any questions? Questions or comments?
That's it.
We're really happy that you're representing us for sure.
I appreciate it. One last thing I'll just say is, my email address is up there. We'll get you also Christine's email address. We're always available. Reach out to us. Big questions, small questions, big issues, small issues, whatever. We're here to be a resource for all of you. So don't hesitate.
So I guess if there's no more questions for Paul, I guess we'll just move on. And if there's questions down the road that we might get from YouTube, because I know there's a little bit of a lag, maybe we can, answer them and send it out later or something, Paul, right? I'm just seeing if there's any. Okay. All right, so just a clarification about what the various schools that will be open, I guess charter schools, public schools. Do you have any comment on that?
What I can do is I can send you the announcement if you want to make it available to everybody. But I believe it's up to the local school district to decide on how they're going to.
Right. Okay.
I'll try to put it into the chat box too. I mean, I'll see if I'm see that.
So the way that the questions are coming in from the YouTube is there's kind of a lag. That's why I'm trying to see if there's nothing. Okay. We're all learning with this format, right?
Great. Well, thanks again, Eileen. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate all you do for us, Paul, and the fact that you're always available. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
We're lucky to have you, for sure. Okay, so I guess right now I will move along, and I'm pleased to announce Mercedes Witowsky, the Executive Director of the New Jersey Council on Developmental Disabilities. We as Family Support Planning Councils are intertwined with the NJCDD. They fund us and they share information with us and back us up in all of our efforts, and we're very privileged to have that. So Mercedes has been working in the disabilities field for over 40 years, and she's championed multiple family advocacy efforts across the state. And she was chair of the Family Support Planning Council before she took her post as the executive director. Also, she championed the Family Advisory Council, which we work along with the division to make policy and represent our people. So we're very pleased to have Mercedes speak for us this morning.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's so great to be here with you, if not in person, certainly in this format. I am going to defer for a minute back to Paul. Paul, I got a question via my text for somebody who couldn't access the chat, asking if you could tell us the major topics in your report.
Do you want me to do that now? I don't want to use up your time, but I could.
Yeah. I'll ask the chair if I can add another minute to mine, but if you would like to take that question, I'd like to get people the answer.
I think Eileen's saying yes. Okay. So the report, and again, we're hoping that the report will be released in just a matter of days. But like last year, I sort of divided it up between systemic observations and recommendations and issue specific. And I addressed a lot of the same things I did last year, but a lot of time I took a deeper dive on some of them, and I also added to them. But in terms of, sort of systemic, again, starting off with the need for simplification, or just the complexity of our system, the need for more of a sense of urgency on folks who are working on our issues throughout. I also added a little section on the importance of looking at disability rights through the lens of civil rights and human rights. It's something we need to do locally as well as nationally. The need for more choice, more folks with disabilities at the table. And that's actually a common theme that runs throughout the report on the issues and on many of the conversations I have with policymakers. We need to find ways to make sure that the voice is actually heard, that the voice of individuals is heard and families. And that, I think, one of my recommendations I make a couple times is that folks that are working on these issues in government need to get out of their office. They need to go visit with people. They not just attend meetings like this, as important as this is, but actually go see up close and personal what our families are dealing with. And conversely, I think we need to get more individuals and more family members appointed to positions. We need them in offices. We need them sitting at the table. Last year, and I sort of made reference to it again this year, was this whole issue with the plastic straws. I think is a good example. There was an effort nationally as well as in New Jersey to ban plastic bags and to, alongside of it, ban plastic straws because it's good for the environment. Sounds like really noble, thoughtful policy, except if you need a plastic straw to get your nourishment, to get your hydration. And so, here in New Jersey, we saw that once advocates sort of made that perspective known, that was stripped out of the legislation. Now, food places, if, when this law passes, hopefully, will have to make straws available. I only say that because I believe that if in that Sierra Club meeting or wherever it was, came up with that great idea to ban plastic straws, if there was somebody in a wheelchair, somebody who depended on a straw, to get their nourishment or hydration, that policy would never have been formed. And so, again, it took more than a minute here. See, this is what happens when you give me a chance to talk about the report, but that's a theme that goes throughout. We need more perspective from the disability community in forming policy. I'll leave it at that. How's that?
Thank you, Paul. We love to hear anything you have to say. For sure. Okay, so Mercedes, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Eileen. Thanks, Paul, for answering that question. And I think that answer also just dovetailed perfectly with what I was about to talk about anyway. So again, it's great to be with you. I do want to say that, while this virtual platform is something many of us are not used to, I will do a shout out to Jed Robinson from England, who joined us today so that Jed could learn more about charting the LifeCourse. So look at that. We've never had a visitor from England on any of our meetings in person, but we got to do this, and thank you for joining us. And I hope that you get the information that you're looking for. So the council, like the Ombudsman's office, is an independent body in our state and across the country that works to support programs and activities that promote self-determination, integration, and inclusion for people with disabilities. And this platform, through the Family Support Planning Council, gives people an opportunity to have their voices heard. And the ultimate goal is that people have the voice and the ability to shape systems and design the systems in the state and things that work and do not work. So I'm glad that we have this opportunity to even continue that work despite not being close together. So I want to thank the Family Support Planning Council, Gabrielle and Eileen, for the leadership that you've shown through this time. I think that keeping people connected, first it was important to figure our lives out, as me too, a parent of a 30-year-old young beautiful daughter with disabilities, figure out how we're going to make our lives work, but then immediately jump in and figure out how to help other families connect to what they need and how to figure out how to make their lives work. So, I would have thought nothing less, and certainly we have delivered in that way. The New Jersey Council on Developmental Disabilities is led by Paul Blaustein. He's our chair. He's a parent, and Kevin Nunez, who's our vice chair. He's a self-advocate. And they've worked along with the executive committee really hard to adapt and deliver during this time as well. One of the things we were able to do was to very early on, as this unfolded, put out emergency funding requests, and we're able to award almost $250,000 to assist about 2,500 people in some way as they adapted to the governor's stay-at-home order and had their lives uprooted and day programs closed and schools closed. So I'm proud of that work at the council. I wanted to just share that with all of you. And then our staff, they had to immediately adapt, as all of us have, to how to stay connected to families, how to stay connected to individuals with disabilities, and the other work that we do, because the council's governed by a 5-year plan, and that 5-year plan must deliver regardless of a pandemic. While we've been given some flexibility from the federal administration, where most of our funding comes from, to adapt and extend some of our deadlines, we still have goals and objectives to deliver on. I also want to recognize our system partners. So, since before Paul took his position as ombudsman in our state with that long title, he came to a Family Support Planning Council meeting, I won't forget, at the Arca Mercer, because we had issues with the way the personal preference program had been transitioned to a fiscal intermediary, and the struggles that many people were having. And Paul came and listened at that meeting and spoke to families. And at that point, I think built and from that a relationship has blossomed. So thank you, Paul, for being there pre-position and now for all this work through your time as ombudsman. And we can't wait to work with Christine. So the other system partners that we work with, the Boggs Center, who you'll hear from later today, from Colleen McLaughlin, and Disability Rights New Jersey, we've done a lot of our work together, because together we are stronger. And we've presented 4 town halls already, and we have a series of 4 more coming up, and I'll give you some dates in just a few minutes. One of the things that Eileen had asked me to talk about in this update was the New Jersey Fee-for-Service Transition Oversight Board, a role that I have on that board, is one of the board members. And I know when I was thinking back to trying to just explain that to you, it feels like it was something that was like ancient history, like so long ago. And part of that is because the board was established back in 2017, and that is almost 3 years ago, to do some work that would focus around monitoring the transition from that contracted service system to the fee-for-service system, also to determine the adequacy of the rates that were established for fee-for-service, and to provide recommendations for that, to facilitate that transition. So we got a really late start. The governor didn't appoint the council members for quite some time after the legislation was passed. And while we issued our first report on time, the second report, like Paul's report, was due just at the time when the COVID had really hit us here in New Jersey. So I'll tell you a little bit about what the work that was done in the draft report that we have, and then certainly we'll be sharing the final report, which we hope that will come out soon as well. We held 3 listening sessions back in December, which again feels like ancient history. One in the north, one in the central, and one in the south. We had about 125 people attend those listening sessions, and we had about an equal number of people who wrote in with comments. And the overall feedback and themes of that of those sessions, I'm going to just list some of the topics: DSP staffing issues, and specifically pay, support coordination, rehabilitation, goods and services, the NJCAT, housing, transportation, person-centered services with a focus on quality outcomes and measurement. Sorry, the list is long. Access to services through qualified providers with choice, provider business rules and system business rules, and rate sustainability. It's a really long list. So the board worked through that list, gathered the input that we received, and began to lay out a series of recommendations related to what we also heard at those listening sessions and in that opportunity for input. So once this report is issued, we will continue to welcome input. The board's work is not done. We're also waiting for an award to be made by the state of New Jersey for a consultant who is supposed to bring to this picture a better understanding of the pre-transition budget fees that were associated with during the contract, and then the fee for service. So a lot more work to be done, but we hope that we'll continue to finish the charge of the legislation and bring the process vital information that will move the system forward. I also thought I'd take a few minutes to talk about some of the COVID-related activities, and certainly feel free to use your chat on YouTube and use your chat in the WebEx platform to ask any questions or leave any comments as we go along. So I'm going to run quickly through some of the activities since March of this year. I already mentioned the grants. I also wanted to talk about how we benefited from the many collaborations that we already had in place over the last couple of years, and then really expanded that. And Paul talked about the hospital visitation policy. I'll tell you that our counterpart, the council up in Connecticut, wrote to me yesterday and thanked New Jersey for taking a very serious advocacy effort within that policy, because the Office of Civil Rights joined with Connecticut and actually used New Jersey's policy as the model policy to create their hospital visitation policy, which basically, up until the policy was created in New Jersey and now up in Connecticut, if you had a loved one with disabilities who needed you at their side in the hospital, you weren't allowed to go. And now you are allowed to be in the hospital, and also allowed to name a second person to relieve you if that were necessary. We couldn't have done that without all of your help and your advocacy and the determination of the system partners in our state. I mentioned the 4 town halls that we already hosted. We had John Ziefried from DDD on one of those, and we thank him for that. We had Kim Buxenbaum and Dominic Rota from the Department of Education, and we had Molly Green from the Children's Care. They're all recorded, but as you can imagine, things change very quickly, so you can go back and take a listen. But our next series, our town hall series, will begin this Thursday, June 18th. The first 2 sessions in this 4-part session will focus on adults and around reopening and reimagining supports and services. So June 18th and 25th from 7 to 8 p.m. And then on July 9th and 16th, also from 7 to 8 p.m., there will be a focus on children under the age of 21 using school and children's system of care services, again, focusing on reopening, and then the second session on reimagining the important things that we can listen and learn from each other around. So let's see what else I found on my list here. Eileen Hurley, the chair of the council and the Family Support Planning Council, and I both serve on the DDD reopening committee. I'll also mention Rebecca Novemsky was very active in advocating for the education services that the governor announced yesterday, that now offers in-school classes beginning July 6th, again, depending upon how the districts proceed in that. And then also guidance on additional services, or what typically is known as comp services, compensatory services for graduating students this year. There is guidance on that. Maybe somebody could put that up in the chat if that's something of interest to you or that you'd like to share. So back to reopening for a second. We have met twice, and we have another series of probably 8 more meetings before we hope to have the work concluded. And there are some after the last meeting, the second meeting. There's also some additional subcommittee work going on. And the focus of that is on the now. How are we going to manage through and get access to the remote services that are available? And then the second on pre-opening, what are the things that are going to happen right before things open? A soft opening, how are things going to slowly move to opening, and then a ramp up full opening, and then that last piece, unfortunately, a way to scale back openings and things that had to abruptly come to an end, how to kind of scale back if that ever becomes necessary. The other areas of advocacy have been around personal protective equipment, testing, remote services, enhanced DSP payments, parents, spouses, and guardians becoming paid support staff, and many folks have, and overtime pay. In the midst of the last 3 months with everything else going on, the council has also issued 3 reports. One is on addressing barriers to oral health. The other is on building capacity to improve adult health care with basic education and training to our medical professionals. And then the last is our 2019 annual report. All of those are on our website. So I'll also just put a plug in asking you to get ready to participate in our public comment period for our next 5-year plan. Our 5-year plan will begin, our new 5-year plan will begin 2022 and go through 2026. So look out next week for some ways in which you can participate, a variety of ways, and really encourage that. So the plan speaks to what you see as concerns and areas needing attention. And then I'm going to leave with electronic visit verification, yet another acronym, EVV. Stay tuned on that. The state has about 6 months now to prepare for implementing electronic visit verification for all in-home services. So there's going to be opportunities for input and advocacy, but I will and do encourage you to tune in as that information comes about, because I think it has lots of impact and there's lots of room for you all to be heard. So I'm going to just look at my phone and see if there's any questions. I don't think I see a
Mercedes, I think, I'm not sure, it's something, when will everything be, I think it's when will everything be included in fee for service? And I think maybe the question has to do with, going forward and just maybe perhaps if you're home, if you're only doing half time, will everything be included in the fee for service budget that you're doing? Or I think that might be it. Or the other question might be, are parents going to continue to get paid going forward with this new thing? And I think that that's something that we'll work on in the work group, but that's something maybe that looks like a question that came on the YouTube. I'm not sure. That's the way I'm understanding it.
So let me speak then quickly to 2 things on that. Not everyone has transitioned to fee for service. A large majority of folks have, but there are I don't have the exact number, but 6 months ago there were about 2,000 people that had not moved into the fee for service system and were still under the contract system. That had been put on hold for a little bit, as John reported. John Ziefried reported on the last DDD town hall update meeting. But they are now ramping that back up again, and will begin to do telephone reach out to anyone who is in contracted services that still needs to transition to fee for service. So that's moving forward again. If the council, Family Support Planning Council, the Family Advisory Council, and DDD just worked on a new quick guide to the DDD service system, which includes both the community care program and the supports program. There is a new guide that was just published within the last few weeks, and maybe somebody could add that link to the chat, or certainly we can email it out to everyone that registered. That will show you all the services that are available in the fee-for-service system. So if you were in the contracted system, those services are not available. They will be available when you move services into the fee-for-service system. So I'm not sure if that answered the question completely, but that's what I could put on the table relating to those.
I got notified that was the actual question. When will we all be converted? I also see a question, Mercedes, here about where can I find the dates and topics for the next 4 town halls? So I guess maybe we can send that out as well to people.
Yeah, easy, quick and easy today, you could go to Disability Rights New Jersey website, and they had sent the electronic message out yesterday for registration for those 4 town halls. You would register for them individually. I know that on Monday morning, we will be sending it out from the council.
Okay.
On the mailing list, or if you're not on our mailing list, go to njcdd@njcdd.org, and you can register to be put on our mailing list. Go to Facebook and like us on the New Jersey Council on Developmental Disabilities or Family Support Planning Council. And I like to get information in multiple ways. I encourage you all to do that too. This way you don't miss anything.
For sure. So we have another question requesting for guidance on those aging out to be shared. I guess aging out, transitioning students, I guess.
So is this relative to compensatory services? Maybe somebody can, or I'm not talking, I can try to put the link to the guidance that was issued yesterday, where the Department of Education has recommended districts to consider compensatory services. So I would say to that, if you have a child that's aging out, that's graduating from the educational entitlement, to request an IEP meeting through your school district on Monday, immediately. Request an IEP and talk about the services that were lost as a result of the, not being in school since March, the linkages to the community, the transition that was being planned or you thought about planning in those last few months, and have an IEP meeting, because it's going to be individual by individual as how that would be delivered. And the Department of Ed has guided and instructed the school districts to work through on an individual basis how to get the services that someone might have missed and is very important to the transition to adult life. And then there was a question, will group homes be included in EVV? Group homes are, many group homes, many residential services are already using some form of EVV because it helps support and back their provider payments. The EVV requirements are for in-home services. It would not be group home. That would be services coming into your home. Specifically, and we all knew this from the beginning, personal care assistance services that are provided either by self-directed employees, family members, or agencies who provide personal care assistance services. But we understand now that this will also apply to the in-home services that you may contract and use within DDD's services in certain service areas. So more to come on that, and that's why I use that as a stay tuned. And somebody asked a question about conversations regarding parents continuing to be paid after July to provide their family member. That is something that we at the council have already advocated, that we advocated pre-COVID that parents, guardians, and spouses be allowed to be self-directed employee paid caregivers. They already can through an agency, but to be self-directing, that was not permitted until that was included after COVID. We are encouraging folks who are using that approach to write to the state, to write to your legislators. I say all hands on deck on this advocacy, because given the DP shortage and given how we've advocated pre-COVID that family members, parents, guardians, spouses are in the best position to provide the care, because we know our kids best, that I hope that the state will continue to use this even post-COVID. I don't know if Eileen, you want me to read the other question? There's another question, it's much longer, so I couldn't skim it quickly. Can we do that? Now that the governor has lifted the shelter-in-place order, families are very anxious to visit, including overnight to see their family members. Group homes are still not allowing visits. I have a concern that this could be a violation of their rights. Many clients contribute 30% of their income toward rent, giving them tenant rights. I'm concerned a civil lawsuit may be filed in the future against the state and providers. I will tell you that the state, and again, John Ziefried on Thursday at the state DDD division update meeting did say that there was a policy that was being reviewed and would be issued early next week regarding visitors. The reopening committee has had an opportunity to look at that policy and weigh in, and I really do believe that early next week we will see a policy from the division, and I think that it will be something to move us forward through this. So please, just a few more days of patience. I can say this, I can look over the balcony and see my daughter, and my heart goes out to people that have not been able to see their children through this time. But I think a few more days of just waiting for this to be released, we'll see something very soon. So what happens to the portion, Eileen has more time on that. What happens to the portion of the budget in the last 3 months that was not used? Parents have been taking care of their kids. Can they be reimbursed for those funds? I'm not sure how retroactively anything could be applied. Since early on, you are able to become a self-directed employee for your child, either through an agency, which I understand from some people that can happen a lot more quickly, or I've heard people move pretty quickly through PPP, PPL, public partnerships in enrolling. So talk to your support coordinator. It is still available to happen now, and your budget would still be available to include other services and supports. Again, your support coordinator would be the first place to go for that conversation. Okay, I don't see any other questions coming through. Is the reopening, one more, is the reopening group addressing people in residential settings? I think I addressed that already. You're on mute, Eileen.
Yeah, I was just going to add, we are addressing everybody that's impacted in that work group. I think that whatever comes up, we're trying to address. So that I just wanted to comment on that. So Kyoko, I think, how are we on time right now? Because unfortunately I'm not seeing the timing of the agenda. I don't know. Does anyone have the agenda in front of them? It should be me. I apologize.
I think we
Well,
can move on to Colleen.
yes, is it time? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mercedes, for all of your updates. And we are, you know, you're doing such a great job for us, and we really appreciate it. So thanks for taking the time to update us on everything. Okay, so I am pleased to announce and Colleen McLaughlin, who is the Associate Director of the Boggs Center on Developmental Disabilities. And she is responsible for directing the center's disability policy and community training and technical assistance initiatives. And she's going to be discussing today charting of the LifeCourse. And I can't do it justice, Colleen, so I will absolutely turn it over to you. Also, Tricia Brennan, who is the director of the waiting list and special projects for fee-for-service conversion team with DDD, will also be discussing this. So we welcome you and thank you for taking your time to educate us on this wonderful program.
Thanks, Eileen. Before we get started and Tricia's going to kick us off, I just want to make sure, can you see our PowerPoint slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I'm going to turn it over to Tricia, who's going to introduce what we're going to give some details about the Charting the LifeCourse framework and the way that we're implementing it here in New Jersey and getting it kicked off. Today, we're really going to spend a lot of time focusing on how the Charting the LifeCourse framework can be used within the pandemic situation, but also in terms of contemplating a vision for what the future could look like. And I'll flip through the slides for you, Tricia, if you're ready, if you want to unmute.
Me?
There you are.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Just checking. Sometimes I have technical difficulties. So the first thing I want to go through is the fact that as a state, New Jersey applied and was accepted to be part of the Community of Practice, which is a national group that is coming through and really shaping and changing the way people think about ways supports and services are delivered. And really looking at the next step. So a group of us went out and went through an intensive learning phase and we're becoming ambassadors right now as to how to implement some of the tools and really shift the mindset in which people are looking at things and allocating a way in which services and supports are really provided within the community. So when we left Kansas, we came out with a goal for New Jersey. So our goal for New Jersey for implementation is that for people with disabilities and families to be empowered to communicate their vision for a good life, and for professionals and systems to ask questions, listen, and act on the strategy to help us reach this vision. So when we came back, one of the first things that we did as we moved through the goal was to formulate a stakeholders group, and that stakeholders group comprised of folks from advocates, from families, from different lines in the statewide community. So there are many different units in our system, and we weren't all working together, and that working together to kind of pull together resources and work and get to the next step. As we move forward, we talked about, Colleen, you can actually go to the next slide. The real main goal for the community of practice, so the national goal is to build a capacity through the community of practice across and within states to create a policy, practice, and systems to better assist and support families, to include a member with an intellectual disability. So remember, see how I'm saying supporting families, I'm not saying family support. Really the gauge is family support's it's more of an actual service. This is how we can support the whole entire family unit as we need to get the right supports and services provided, and based upon the individual's needs as they go through their life trajectory. So what it is they're looking for and how we get to the next steps. So really looking, because it's based upon the principles that all people, so no, I'm not saying people with disabilities, all people should have the right to live, love, laugh, and play with and work within their community. So everyone should have those same abilities within their community and pull upon the same resources that we have. So again, one of the first things that we wanted to do was talk about the 3 circles. But before I get to 3 circles, I'm going to talk a little bit about the fact that as a state, we embarked upon how we can look at next steps. So getting the stakeholders group together, really trying to infuse, because this isn't a new tool, this isn't a new thing, this is how you change somebody's thinking. So the services and supports are evolving. So everybody exists in the context of their family. So the person's in one space, and then their families around them, because we all come with whatever our family and whatever is within our community, and that is how, you know, the services and supports that people had. So then we, as things moved forward, we were able to get services and supports for people with who have traditional needs for traditional disability services. But what we found was that puts almost a layer around the person, because they were only going to where you go for people with disabilities. So we really wanted to say that, you know, the integrated support star has, sometimes you need those eligibility-based supports, but you need to also ask that question of, where would anybody go for supports and services? Where would you go within your community? We also wanted to, as a state of New Jersey, we wanted to really focus our first step on celebrating the successes, because many times people don't come to the division and say, like, hey, these are all the awesome things you've done for us. They come with the things that, you know, the additional services and supports they're needing. We wanted to really let the light shine on the people who have done some really great things, and have everyone see, oh wait, maybe I could do something similar, and how we can get to there. So we talked a lot about how we can get to these next steps and the next practices, and how we can support the person in, you know, figuring out their next step in how they get their problems solved, how we can have the specific area in practice. So we have some tools we're going to share. So Colleen's going to share some of the tools, and how we can get some educational resources out there as well. We talk about the 3 buckets a lot, and those 3 buckets are the discovery and navigation. So you figure it out. And as ambassadors, those of us who've been going through the ambassador series, we've had to dig deep within ourselves and see what's changed and what's different, and utilizing this crisis as something that, you know, take a step back and say, hey, wait, you know what? We've been going along and doing things a certain way. Well, why are we doing it this way? What could change? How can we pull upon other resources within our communities? Who else can we connect with? Where else can we get specific services? Where are the next steps? Because this is a time, and really capitalizing on this time and taking a breath and saying, okay, where can we look upon these resources? And was what I was doing in my day-to-day structured activities, was that really working, or could something else work better? So we talked a little bit about that as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Colleen, because we had a lot of discussion as a group about how we can make this work during a public health crisis. So what has happened now to make this change? So Colleen?
Thanks, Tricia. So throughout the coronavirus pandemic, you know, many people with disabilities, families, and those providing support were really tasked with addressing a wide array of circumstances. People were obviously confronted with a dramatic change in their routine. And people needed to figure out new ways to stay active and also stay in contact with friends and family. Families and other supporters were tasked with figuring out, how do you describe to your loved one with a disability why you can't go to school, why you can't do the things in the community that you enjoy, and then in many cases, why you couldn't go to work. I'm sure all of us can really talk about how we, in our houses, there's a heck of a lot of togetherness going on. And while this togetherness can have some negative aspects, it also gave rise to a lot of new connections within households, and also opportunities to reconnect with some of our loved ones that live far away using virtual technologies. It was always amazing doing some of these webinars over the past few months, the rapid increase in the number of people being accustomed to using Zoom and WebEx and other technologies, not necessarily because they've been participating in webinars all the time, which was one main reason, but more because they were using those technologies to stay in contact with family members, oftentimes sometimes more than they would have stayed in contact with them in other times. But the other thing that this togetherness has helped to cultivate is really learning more about each other and our loved ones and how we really want our lives to look. It gave rise to a lot of contemplation. So in each of the situations that we're confronted with, we need to continue to think. And I also think that with the pandemic, it really created this new element of urgency for what we need to do now, but also what we need to do in the future. And the Charting the Life course concepts and tools can be really helpful in conceptualizing all of these needs, preferences, and most importantly, a vision for the possibilities in a wide array of circumstances. So over the next few slides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to guide you through some of the tools that you may find helpful for planning right now in the current pandemic situation, but also, and probably more importantly, what the future can look like. Because there's really a great opportunity for changing what the possibilities for people with disabilities are right now as we create a new normal. So a couple things I wanted to point out. Recently we published, we at the Boggs Center published a new planning tool called Planning Ahead for When the What If Is Now. It's an emergency planning document for when a primary caregiver is no longer able to provide support, potentially due to hospitalization, quarantine, illness, or in extreme circumstances, death. It was really designed to help people think about and have these difficult conversations about topics that we all know are difficult and extremely hard to have. And a couple of things we've heard people say is that people have had these aha moments and realized like, oh, I didn't get everything I needed to written down. And now that I know that there could be a situation where my loved one may be left without a primary caregiver, I really need to get this information out. So this tool was developed to really help people do this. It was designed to help people have these conversations and then also share these conversations. So people are encouraged to share this information with their supports coordinators, with other family members, with neighbors and friends that may be those first responders should an emergency take place. So people are prepared to dive in and help should an emergency situation arise. And one of the things I want to point out with this new tool is that 2 of the Charting the Life course framework tools were introduced in this document as really helpful planning resources, both in the pandemic situation, but as you're planning ahead for the future. So I want to talk about and give a little snapshot of the first one. And the first one is the life course trajectory. And all of the links to the tools that I'm going to share are on the last slide of this PowerPoint presentation. And I'm also going to tell you an easy way you can find all of them as well. But the life course trajectory is a tool that can really be helpful in capturing all these aha moments that people are having right now. And it's also a helpful tool to help you really envision what the future could look like, or really even envision what the now can look like in certain situations. So this tool can be helpful across all life stages, whether you're talking about a young child that's in school. It can be helpful for planning in transition. It can be helpful for thinking about crisis and emergency situations. It can also be helpful in thinking about aging and as people are getting older, or any aspect of adult life. Right now, what I'd like you to think about it as is a tool that can be useful in planning for emergencies. And one of the things that's important for people to acknowledge is that regardless of being in an emergency situation or not, everybody has the right to live a good life. And this tool can really capture what this good life should look like. For instance, if a parent or another loved one is no longer able to provide support, what does that good life look like? What needs to be maintained, and what may need to be implemented to help that person feel supported, comforted, or valued should that primary caregiver no longer be able to provide support. So that's the positive side. And if you look on the right-hand side of this chart, you'll see that good life. So what does that good life need to look like should the primary caregiver no longer be able to be there? More often than not, we sometimes focus on the negative things, and that's not always bad. That's actually really important, and we need to do that. So we also need to consider, what does the person not want to happen should mom, dad, or another caregiver not be able to provide support? What are people afraid to lose? What do they not want to see happen? Who do they not want to provide their support? It's really important that this information be captured as well. And so the other thing to think about, if we shift over to the left-hand side of this tool, is the fact that during this pandemic, many of you have learned about what works well, what doesn't work well. And this is a place where you can capture this information so that you're not recreating the wheel in new emergency situations, and that other people can have the ability to acknowledge, like, oh, this doesn't work for Joe. We need to make sure that we don't do this. Or, oh, this really has worked well for Sue. We need to make sure that we're always putting these things in place. So when we look to the far left, what we'll see here is a place to capture the learning and share what these past life experiences are. Example, this pandemic. What are some of the experiences that the person has had that has helped contribute to the person's good life? And then and those experiences that have also happened that have been a little more detrimental and pushed away from the person's ability having a good life. This information isn't just useful in the emergency situations, but I think it gives rise to contemplation on, are we learning new things about the person? Are there things that the person may want to have implemented after the crisis starts to subside? So then we look towards the middle section, which is really focused on moving forward. And this is a place where we can really think about and plan for the future. It's a place where we can think about the supports, people, and goals that need to be put in place in order for to increase the likelihood that good lives are going to happen. And it's also a place to really brainstorm some of these potential barriers that can prevent good lives from happening, both in the emergency situation or any future situation. And considering these barriers, we don't want to just stop with identifying what they are. The reason why we want to put them on paper and write them down is so we take that next step and figure out what solutions need to be put in place to address these potential barriers, so that should another emergency arise or moving down the road, a crisis come into play, that these barriers can be addressed more readily. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this tool too, and bear with me because I'm trying to look at the questions that may be coming through. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this tool because I'm looking at the list of some of the people that have been on this, and I know that you've heard some about this tool and the use of this tool already, but I will share some basic information, particularly for some of you that may be on the YouTube stream and haven't heard. So this is the Integrated Support Star, and it's a tool that can be used to brainstorm and identify a variety of supports that an individual, a particular location or region, or even an entire state may have available. It helps people to look both at and beyond eligibility-based supports and look within themselves and their personal strengths. It has them look at the people and the variety of people in their lives available to provide support, or people that they just want to stay close to. It also helps to determine the supports that are available to everyone in our communities, our YMCAs, our rec centers, our grocery stores that have cooking classes, our craft stores, those types of things. And it also determine what technological supports are available for people to be able to tap into. Some of those things that we didn't really scratch the surface of using until the pandemic. So throughout this pandemic, The Integrated Support Star has been promoted as a way for individuals and families to brainstorm the various ways that they can stay connected, both socially and emotionally while they're social distancing. But it's also been used as a means to identify potential support options through use of virtual technology and other means. I'm sure you're not surprised to learn that over the past few months, we've heard a lot of people have started to learn about and use more technological supports. And some of these, I think, are things that we can really start to look at in terms of we've used them now. Sometimes we like some of them we didn't like so much. But what do we want to continue moving in the future, to use in the future? Many people have learned about a lot of community resources that have been made available through their communities through use of virtual technology, things like virtual yoga classes, virtual music classes, virtual art classes. And some of those things have led to a connection to community-based supports that while they've been opening up, they may want to start to research and look into using some of those community resources on an in-person basis. So, yes, I'm sorry. I'm trying to look at the questions. Yeah, and I think that's some of the things. So some of the things coming on is like the struggles with doing things online and how things work. How things work and how things don't work well for people. And I think that's really important. And I think the other thing is with the online situation and some of those classes is not just acknowledging that they're not perfect, because they do have a disconnect and people need social relationships, but thinking about those organizations that are providing some of those online supports and the ways they may be an asset as the community start to open up, and that we can sort of tap into some of those community-based resources on an in-person basis as well. So literally just thinking differently and thinking new. And I think the other thing is, another question we have is about guidelines in terms of planning for emergencies, and how a lot of the strategies that we're giving you right now have really been developed for people living within their own homes. And yeah, a lot of those are, but I think that there's also ways that we can lift some of these strategies and ideals for people living in residential settings as well, because just as it's important to plan for people living in their own homes for emergencies with a caregiver that may be a family member, we also need to think about those emergency situations that may happen if somebody lives in, let's say, a supported apartment or other type of residential setting, or living on their own, should a primary caregiver not be able to provide support. And some of these strategies can easily be used in all of those cases. They're not just necessarily meant for people living at home, but what they're meant to do is really help us think about the different areas of everybody's life and what needs to be put in place in order to help with that. So like I said before, being stuck at home has given us a lot of time to think. Time to think about really the here and now, but also time to think about the future and how we can make things better. Frequently, and actually more often than not, new innovations are birthed out of turmoil. As people think more about what they want for their lives and what needs to take place for this to happen. The Charting the Life Course framework, as you can see from this slide here, promotes the exploration of life, real life possibilities for people, and encourages us to think about the various life stages that you'll see in the life domains that you'll see here on the top of this very chart. So life domains of daily support and employment, community living, healthy life, our safety and security, social and spirituality, advocacy engagement, and then supports and families, and what the integrated supports like Tricia had talked about and the buckets and the stars can look like. So what you'll see here in this table, it helps us to see an array of service options that are available, both ones that are traditional. So when we're thinking of day programs, group homes, supported apartments, center-based therapies when you're going to a place to get your therapy, things like guardianship, specialized services, those are traditional type services. But what you'll also see here is this middle road, where you start to see more innovative and community-based life options that are available to people. And you'll see there's a wide array, many of which people in New Jersey are tapping into now, many of which people would like to explore more. And this gives a snapshot of those. And I think one of the things that crisis situations also often give rise to is contemplation about the extent to which people want to go back to the services that they had, or if they want to start to look at something new. And then also, as businesses have had to shut down, for lack of a better word, how have they contemplated ways that they want to reopen in ways that will better address people's needs and life goals. So this really gives rise to a lot of opportunity and rise for us to take a look at that middle road and what we may want to be able to tap into as things start to open up. But also that up here, I'm going to try to point with my little mouth, the new ideas and the things that we haven't even thought of yet in terms of strategies and supports. So I mentioned the life trajectory in the sense of using it for emergency planning. Now, it's also really helpful. Oh, and I see a question about not keeping track of the links. Don't worry about the links. They're all going to be at the bottom. And the emergency planning document can be found on the Boggs Center's main webpage in our COVID page. We have a COVID resources, and it's on the COVID resources page. And we can also, if people want to email me, or I guess Rebecca or Kyoko, we can send you the links out. But they're all going to be found on this PowerPoint at the very end, and we can get these out in some way, shape, or form. So we'll get them out to people. So I mentioned use of the trajectory in the sense of emergency planning. And as we think about the opportunities that await, we can't neglect thinking about the concept of employment. Many people with disabilities, unfortunately, and many people in general, have lost their jobs during this time, either due to layoffs or health concerns. And I know people are struggling to contemplate what this is really going to look like as we open. There are many people that are going to be lucky to return to jobs, but there are going to be quite a few others that are going to be faced with looking for new employment options. So here what I'd like to share is ways that you can use the life trajectory to start thinking about employment and what employment will look like in the new normal. This tool here is helpful to identify both what people are looking at in their jobs, but in addition, as you'll see, there's a little square at the top that helps you keep in mind the good life. Because if we think about it, our jobs are really one of the means to help getting a good life. And it's the jobs and the salaries and the paychecks we get through our jobs that help us to be able to do many of the things that bring meaning to our lives. The other thing that this tool helps us to do is it helps encourage the user of the tool to really think about what's helped a person to get a job in the past. So that's up here in the top left-hand corner. So if you or a loved one has lost a job or is looking at getting a job in the new world, and have had some level of job experience, this is a great way to identify those tips and tricks that have helped in the past. But then the other thing is, if you look at the bottom, what are some things that have gotten in the way from the person to get a job? Because those are barriers that would need to be addressed in order for the person to successfully gain employment. These are also things that you may want to consider. Given the pandemic situation, are there special healthcare considerations given if an employer is saying, you know, we'd really love you to come back, but we're really not in the clear yet. So are there barriers and considerations and risks that need to be considered for a person to be able to go back to work? And I also want to point out with regard to risk and employment, we have another useful resource on the Boggs Center website about assessing this risk for a person that may want to go back to work, or assess the risk for staying in work as well. So this Charting Life Course tool can be really helpful in thinking about employment. I also want to say that we can easily, with all of these tools, not just focus on what's in the header, but you can easily change it. So if you're thinking about day activities, you can think of the life trajectory in what are some of the things that people want to be able to enjoy in their communities during the day. What does that look like? And how does that help contribute to the person's good life? What needs to be put in place on that arrow to help make sure that the person's going to achieve the good life? And then what things you want to make sure you avoid, those things that are going to contribute to the person not having what he or she wants in his or her life. So I had mentioned the whole concept of use of the integrated support star and how we use that to help people identify ways to stay connected and engaged while social distancing, and also as a means to identify the supports and services that may be available to people throughout the pandemic. But I also wanted to share it with you as a resource to really start to think towards the future, and as a way to help imagine the variety of supports that can be tapped into. This tool was used before the pandemic by a group of, actually you guys, many of you on this call, to identify the variety of supports that are available in regions and across the state. It's really a helpful tool that can be used as a means to pool resources or share ideas. So when networks of people with disabilities and networks of families get together to brainstorm, it's really cool to see how this tool can help people share, oh, I've used this resource and I've used this resource over here. And then you have people say, oh, I never thought of that before. Can you share that information with me? It's a really great way, it's a structured way to help people brainstorm and bring information together. And also helps us to identify what we may want to investigate further. So when people are using this tool and they're thinking of all their personal strengths and assets, the relationships they have, the eligibility-based supports that are available, the community-based supports that are available, and the technology-based supports that are available, I really want to encourage people to not keep their ideas to themselves. Share these ideas with others so that these ideas will grow. And it's really quite amazing for us to all see that this is how new ideas are birthed. This is actually how many of us that have been in working in New Jersey for a while, if we think back to the self-directed movement when it initially started, this is how all of that came to be. It came to be with families getting together and brainstorming new ideas and new innovations and visions for what people wanted in their lives, and people with disabilities getting together and saying, this is what I want. And this is what needs to be put in place in order for this to happen. And now it sounds like we're really confronting this again as we're looking at reopening and all the possibilities that we could have as the system starts to evolve. So I'm checking the questions while I'm going through. Okay, bear with me. I was just trying to check for questions as we're sort of rolling through this. This is a tool that probably a lot of people may not have seen. It's been around, but it's been reconstructed and adapted. And all of these tools have been created by the University of Missouri, Kansas City. They're USED there. So the Boggs Center is a USED, and then there's a USED in Kansas City. And they're the ones that cultivated the whole community of the national community of practice. And most of the tools that we shared today were implemented and adopted to plan beyond the healthcare crisis. And this is another tool that I wanted to share to do this. There's a series of booklets that was created by the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And these booklets are really aimed at driving conversations that are focused on each of the life stages. So the one I'm showing here on this screen is focused on adulthood, but they also have a series of booklets that are focused on infancy, early childhood, school age, transition to adulthood, and also aging. Each of these booklets addresses the 6 major life domains And also presents with each of these life domains a series of questions that are really important to ask if one's to effectively plan and consider the variety of options and opportunities for each life stage. And these booklets, just like the tools that have been shared, are useful for anybody, regardless of where they live, who they live with, and what their goals and aspirations currently are. It's meant to really help people with disabilities vision their life. It's meant for families to be able to contribute to this vision, and for all of people that are providing support to be able to hear what people are saying and be able to identify the supports and services that are available through use of the integrated support star to look at the wide array of options to make sure that people are getting what they're telling us. And the website here can be used to find these tools. And again, I have them at the end as well, so people will be able to tap into those things. So when we look at each of the booklets, I said it mentions the 6 major life domains. And within the life domains, and I'm not going to show you because there's a lot of different questions, they get in a lot of nitty gritty, but what I want to do is introduce it to you as a tool that you can go into later and pop it out. And, you know, as we're still social distancing, even though the state's opening up, we're still at home. It's a great time to sit around the dining room table, around the kitchen table, do it in easy to manage chunks and have these conversations. So what you'll see is that in each of these booklets, there's a series of questions that help people with disabilities really vision for the future. I suggest doing this in the context of the booklet, but also in terms of looking at your future in terms of the life trajectory as well. But there are specific questions in each of these booklets that focus on the needs and preferences related to, you'll see social and spirituality, safety and security, community living, healthy living, advocacy engagement, as well as daily life and employment. Having these conversations and putting the information into action can really help to increase the likelihood that the person's good life is achieved. So when we look at the LifeCourse trajectory, it's really open-ended and helps us think about this grand vision and all the different things that come into play with this vision. These booklets go hand in hand because they help us to think of questions that we need to answer in order for that good life to come to fruition. So when we have these conversations, it helps to helps us to increase the likelihood that the person's good life is going to be able to be achieved through the connection to innovative support options that are available through our service system, but also through our communities, access to technology, and also tapping into the relationships that we have or may be able to cultivate moving forward. And like I said, now is really a good time to have these conversations because the future is really going to be changed as a result of the pandemic. And people are working to design what the new normal will look like. And it's a really optimal time for us to think about this and dream big and take the opportunity to say, hey, if we're reshaping things, let's do it right. So we want to be able to share the answers to questions with your supports coordinator. If you're a parent of young children, share these answers with your care manager or your child study team. Or if even consider asking people to make these questions be the focus of the meeting and have these conversations within an IEP meeting or within a care management team meeting or within a support coordination and ISP meeting. So you can do it either way. You can do it within the team meeting, or you can bring your answers to those meetings and have a conversation about, hey, we've learned this. How are we going to implement it? What are things going to look like? And like I said, you want to use these in the context of the integrated support star and life trajectory, because this will really help us to map out the ideals and the strategies to get there. How are we going to put these supports into action? And by doing this, it can really help people to get out of the typical cycle of approving individualized support plans that never really tend to change, despite there actually being change wanted. This helps us to communicate what people really want and need, and it helps bring the focus back to the person and not necessarily the paperwork. So I went over a ton of different things, and we do want to leave some time for questions, and I do want to show you some of the resources, but we really just scratched the surface with some of the things that are available within the LifeCourse framework. I do want to point out that all of the tools and resources that I went over today, as well as many, many, many others that I'm showing up here, are available on the website www.lifecoursetools.com. So they're available for your use there. And then the links, these are giant links, so I know no one's going to be able to be able to write these down, but we'll be able to share this PowerPoint so you can just click on the links. But these are the direct links to the 4 primary tools that I shared with you today. And the bottom one links not just to the focus on adulthood, but also the tools focused on infancy, school age, childhood, aging, transition, and so forth. And then really what I want to make sure that we, leave with is just moving ahead. I'd love to know, and if you want to type it in the chat, how do you plan to use these tools and concepts to plan for now and in future emergencies? How will you use these tools to network with others to really expand the variety of ideas that are presented, and so people can tap into those new and innovative ideas? And I know I said that we don't want to create new paperwork or just have paperwork, but oftentimes writing down things is how we move things into action. So how are we going to write these down and make sure that we're sharing with people to say, hey, this is what Joe wants in his life. This is what Sue wants in her life. How are we going to make this come to fruition? And how are we going to use this in person-centered planning and also our advocacy efforts to help people understand what people want and need, and how systems and organizations need to be able to change in order for these things to happen? And I'd be remiss if I left this without crediting the Charting the LifeCourse tools and concepts through the development of the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and the National Community of Practice, and how as the state of New Jersey, we're grateful to be able to participate this and use these tools to help people plan and vision for their life in all areas of life stages. And I do want to give a shameless plug that New Jersey Partners in Policymaking is now accepting applications. So if you have friends that may be interested, we're accepting applications from self-advocates that are 21 and over, as well as families of children and transition age youth. The deadline for applying is the end of this month. We'll be reviewing the applications throughout July in anticipation of letting people know if they've been accepted to the program at the end of July. This year, we're going to a hybrid model, obviously because of the COVID pandemic. So the first half of the year will be online, and we hope that the second half of the year we'll be able to have in-person sessions. So all the information and the application for Partners in Policymaking can be found on the Boggs Center website. And the long link is at the bottom there. I think if you Google the Boggs Center, New Jersey, Partners in Policymaking, you'll come right to it with no problem. So there's information about that. And we're really hoping that we have a lot of great applicants this year. We've never ceased to fail having great applicants. The classes have been amazing. So we did want to leave plenty of times for questions, not just for Tricia and I, but for Paul and Mercedes as well. So if people have questions and want to tap it in their chat or in, I guess, the Google, we'll be able to answer questions. And Paul, Mercedes, Eileen, you guys want to?
So there were a few questions. Okay, so Colleen, I don't know if you had a chance to probably not look at these questions. One came in that was a suggestion for written guidance for group homes for future emergencies. I guess I could throw that question out. I don't know if you really have any insight on that, or maybe Mercedes or Paul might. So that was one question that I saw.
So Eileen, this is Mercedes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I would suspect that the fifth prong of the reopening plan will certainly get to that conversation because, again, things had to close down very quickly and without much opportunity to plan things out. So I'm hoping, and I know you and I are on the same page, that when the reopening group gets to that, what happens if we have to scale things back, that we will be having that conversation. So that's a good comment. And I do encourage people to share their comments, ideas. I didn't mention it earlier, but I know I put a quick call out for comments. I know you did also, Eileen. I got close to 70 comments from people sharing thoughts, concerns, questions that we should bring to the reopening group. So that's an excellent one. Group homes, supervised apartments, agencies should have a plan around, a crisis like this. So we'll definitely bring that. And we really I would love to see, and I'll speak for Eileen, would love to see your continued comments, questions, concerns as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. We take everything into account, and we're here to represent everyone. So of course, any comments you may have, and we are working on the now right now because we're still home here, and it doesn't look like for our adults it's going to be as expeditious as it was for the children's. So we are working on and actively looking for what you all feel is working now at home. What would you like to extend? What do you think the pitfalls are? Gabrielle and I sent out a quick survey and we did get about 20 comments. So, please feel free to email us anything that you think is working currently, anything you think you would want to see continued, or anything that is just not working at all. Please send them through to us and we can convey the information to the group, because I think everybody is really interested in collaborating, getting it together, and having something solid that we can all benefit by. And that's an objective. And as Mercedes was saying, there are several, right here, right now, it's a big deal. we need to definitely, have what's best for everyone right now as we're still at home. So there was a question for Colleen suggesting what are some things that we can work on for an extended school year at home? I guess given if you choose not to send your child back to school, but what does that look like? And can you speak to that at all, Colleen?
I would say, I think one of the things is that I come from a very person-centered mindset, and in terms of thinking of the tools, is what's the goal? What do you want to see from an extended school year? What was missed? So I'm going to think things and conceptualize them in the sense of the trajectory. So what does the student want to be able to see in his or her life as they transition or into the next school year? And what needs to be put in place in order for that to occur? So if you're thinking about a student that's going to be going back to school next year, what do you want to see that next year look like? And what maybe were some of the barriers given COVID and the lack of resources and lack of supports that were provided? And what is going to be needed to assure success when the new school year starts? And another side of that is thinking about somebody who's transitioning out of school and into adulthood. Okay, you missed 2-3 months of school because of COVID. What do you want the adulthood to look like? What are the things that were missed that are preventing you from potentially getting that as soon as you go into adult services? And what needs to be put in place to help increase the trajectory of that? So for instance, maybe you missed community-based instruction. Maybe you missed access to learning job skills in the community by virtue of needing to be at home, and remote supports and services didn't really help with that. So what can you do over the summer to help increase the likelihood that the things that that student or young adult wants to achieve can really be put into fruition. And this may involve tapping into some of the resources that are going to be that can be accessed by the school, but also those resources that loved ones and other relationships may be able to provide, but also things that may be able to be tapped into the community. So just looking at that approach of what was maybe missing at that lower level of things. And I'm the worst on webinars because I know you're not supposed to use your hands, but I always use my hands. But like just thinking of it in that sense.
Great. Thank you. So here's another comment. Use of cameras for virtual visits at doctor's appointments should be provided in group homes. I'm not an expert, but isn't that should be happening right now? Or is it the privacy issue? Maybe that they don't have cameras in the group homes. I'm not really sure if anybody has a comment on that one.
So this is Mercedes. So I would say to that, I think they're talking about, electronic devices that can be used for virtual access. And yes, that should be available at the group home. And I would ask the agency if they have that technology for interfacing between, doctor appointments and the individual living in that setting.
If I could just jump in there, I think, so we're talking about telehealth or telemedicine things, but I think one of the issues in the past has been insurance coverage or Medicaid coverage of those kinds of visits. And I think during this crisis that there have been allowances for that. And that might be one of the things sort of we take away, one of the positives we take away from this, seeing telehealth as just another tool, not a substitute for doctor's visits or anything, but maybe can augment services provided.
Good point. Yeah, that's why we were saying we want to accentuate the positive and keep it and try to work on what's not working. And that's a goal of this work group for us, for sure. So that's something to definitely consider. So let's see here. The adult providers are struggling with how to maneuver safely, wondering if there is any kind of cooperative mechanism to share resources going forward. So, does anyone want to field that question? I guess, so I guess they're struggling with, like, just as we open, how that's going to look and how they can share resources going forward. I'm kind of not sure the question. Does anybody have a comment on that one?
It's Mercedes. I'll take a stab because I think that while on the reopen committee, there was discussion about the policy or the guidance that DDD will set, but the providers who are participating and some family members who have interaction with providers for their own children or others that they know are already sharing ways that the virtual meetings, ways in which day programs have adapted their services to be more remote, or in some cases even sending in a former day program staff when that is, mutually agreeable. What I understood from our last call on the reopening was that the division would be anxious to share ways that have worked and ways that have been effective. So I hope that we'll get some of that out of this work group. It won't be guidance, but it will be more support documents. Again, what the question is saying about how to share resources to make that, make getting back out into the community for those that want to be out there effective. You're on mute, Eileen.
Thank you. So there's a comment in terms of people that are living in the group homes, there's a big difference between the quality of life right now for them than the people that are living home with their families. As we open up more, we can take them out on a car ride. We're taking the risk ourselves, and we're making the choice on that. But if they're in a group home, they're just bound to whatever the agency at this point is dictating. So we're working on that as well. But yeah, so there was a comment, I think, about that. So that, again, that's another thing that we're trying to create policy on, and I think there's something in the works, as Mercedes detailed before, with parents being able to visit people in the group homes. So quality of life, there's a big difference right now. So that was a comment. Good comment from whomever made it. I don't know if anybody wants to expand on that. Okay.
Eileen, I'm just going to take one more stab at this. So I did hear on the DD webinar, I heard John talk about, the group homes, apartments, supervised apartments, those providers are not held to discourage getting folks out of those homes. But at the same time, we've heard from families that some providers are in a lockdown, from not leaving the home to individuals actually not even being able to go much further beyond their bedroom. And that's a concern. That's a concern on so many levels. So I believe it was John who did say that if you have issues, you can write to the DDD fee-for-service help desk. You can anonymously or just say the name of the agency, and DDD is their provider performance and monitoring unit is reaching out to providers to address issues that get reported like that people are being, locked. I'll use the term locked in, my term. So let's make sure that if that's happening, that people have an outlet and have an opportunity to express that concern. If you don't want to report it yourself, just let one of us know, Eileen, Gabrielle, myself, and we will anonymously make a comment over the division, and they will follow up on that. And I think Paul has something to say.
Yeah, just I want to add to that, Mercedes. And one of the things that Christina and I have been doing in the Ombudsman office since we started it on March 11th, we've been keeping a daily list of issues, questions, concerns that come into us, primarily from individuals and families, but also we've been getting from providers, advocates, and others. And it's a list we've been keeping, and we don't have any attribution, no personal attribution, just the substance of the message. And we try to do it for verbatim, and we share it with DDD leadership, we share it with CSOC leadership, Department of Education, the governor's front office. And so if to Mercedes' point, if you have any concerns, anything, again, send it to us too, we'll add it to the list. It's not only important because it's informing, again, the decisions that are being made, and this is all new to everybody. So it's a useful tool for them. But it's also going to be interesting, and Christina and I have already started to look back at the list, going back, sort of seeing the evolution, the focus on PPE and testing early on and all these different issues. And so as we go forward, we're hoping to use it as part of the conversation about what worked and what didn't work, and what we can do better. But by all means, feel free to, and I would encourage it because, I said this earlier, it's true in normal times, but particularly in this crisis situation, your input is completely invaluable. You're down there, you're experiencing these challenges firsthand, and to the extent we can hear from you, the better the policies will be going forward.
Absolutely. We encourage all comments for sure, and especially at Paul's office, he's got more of a direct line to the governor than we do. So keep your comments coming. I had a couple of more. So there's been a couple requests to, say, asking if we would be open to continuing more virtual meetings going forward. And so I'm I think that this one's going off pretty well, so I would be definitely open to it. I'm a fan of in-person contact. You know, I like to get out there, but I think that this is also very nice as well. So does anyone have a comment on that? I've seen a couple.
So it's Mercedes. I really hope that we do have this opportunity, even if we get back to in person. This is something that the New Jersey Council on Developmental Disabilities, we had our first statewide public meeting just last month, and we were able to again feed live to YouTube. I hope that we had to learn this by fire, but I really do hope that we can reach more people and keep more people engaged, and we'll get the technology that we need if we're even in person to be able to live stream. So I appreciate that comment, and I would encourage and hope all groups to let the crisis that we've had not go to waste, and at least figure out the ways in which we've been able to connect better to each other in platforms like this.
If I could just answer, I couldn't agree more with that. I think what we need going forward is a hybrid. We need to have both. We need to have, in-person meetings, these kinds of meetings, to make us and the issues and the discussions more accessible to everyone. And I think one of the things I do address in my report is that should extend to government meetings. I mean, this idea of having like a one meeting in one location at one time, it's just, those days have to be over. They're just not accessible. And so I think we all, us in this community, and including folks that work in government, we really need to sort of utilize this technology, again, making the most out of this terrible situation. This is definitely a good thing that can come out of it. And again, I'm sure there are people participating today that wouldn't have been able to get down to Hamilton. And so this is great if we can do both.
We absolutely should. So let me just see here. Yeah, there was a comment that someone's child was on total lockdown, like Mercedes was talking about before in the group homes, and that's why again we're really trying to work with, in this group that we're on, we're trying to work with the agencies to get something that's palatable for all, and we're trying to represent from our side, absolutely, but we need to work together on it, and it's really so disheartening. It's heartbreaking to hear that, not only can you not see your family member, but they're on total lockdown. That's really, that just, it's so upsetting. So we appreciate that comment, and it is something that I'm sure will be discussed going forward. Then, so yeah, we're also hearing that there's some group homes throughout the state that aren't even attempting to work with their people on the virtual learning or anything. So again, I think that there's some really great programs out there, and there's some programs that just really need to be assisted in how they go forward. So hopefully we can work on something that is kind of a directive that they must follow, especially if we're not going to be able to get back to the usual formatting of day programs and activities. Okay, so anybody have a question on that? Or comment, I'm sorry. No? Okay. So here's one. I'm just going to read this. Is this an opportunity to invest more in direct support professionals to provide health insurance and living wage, in-home service, and community inclusion? That was a question. Anybody want to field that one? I guess just based on the pandemic and how things are changing and how life is going to be reimagined, maybe talk about from that perspective. Okay. Well, I'm no expert, but I guess if I guess the question is, since I guess it speaks to what is working that we were talking about. If parents are getting paid and it's working and their kid is happy and the parent is happy and they're not regressing, and they're afraid to send their kid back to a traditional day program, maybe I think there might be some advocacy push towards keeping that in place, like we talked about. So that's definitely a good comment that we can take with us. All right. Okay, here is a question for maybe Paul or Mercedes. Many programs are not doing intakes for 2020 grads. You should plan a special program for families since IEPs will not be able to address these issues. Anybody want to take a stab at that one?
So I would, yeah, Paul, you go.
I was just going to make a plug for our upcoming virtual town halls. As was noted earlier, we have 4 upcoming town halls. The DD partners and the Ombudsman office, conjunction with them, and Colleen and was talking earlier about sort of reimagining, and one of the themes is first we're having an adult program, sort of what does it mean to sort of reopen, and what are the concerns of things, and then reimagining sort of what an ideal sort of week, month, life plan would look like. But we're also doing the second group is on for children and on education, and I would encourage to sort of bring any concerns you have to that conversation. I think those are going to be 2 good opportunities, and we're going to have folks hopefully from the Department of Education and CSOC listening in too. Mercedes, sorry.
So I'll just add that I would encourage you to also contact your support coordinator and have conversations about what other folks are, how folks who are already in the adult system have managed through some of these transitions. And I will say that, there's many support coordination agencies and there's many support coordinators in our state. So not everyone might have the answer you're looking for. So using the town halls is going to be a good way to learn about what some other folks are doing, how to use the remote technology, if that it works, how to bring in supports that you're comfortable with, albeit hiring family members, hiring individuals that your son or daughter may already be familiar with from their from school age now into the adult life. So this is the opportunity to explore, connect with your family support planning council regionally, talk to the folks on the council, and I'll finally plug the town hall. We did send links to the town hall both in the chat on WebEx and on the YouTube feed. So take that step and utilize the tools that Colleen shared to also explore, what what will be the good life. We've all had to do that and reimagine in some way right now. So this is just taking that next step. Colleen, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say that if you do plan on participating in the town hall, it would be fabulous if people could do a little prep ahead of time and think of the tools, because that's what we're hoping to do, is use those sort of to guide some of the chat discussion and what people want to see. So if you can start planning ahead and thinking of some of those things to contribute, it would be great. And then you're not caught off guard with the questions when the town halls happen.
I just wanted to, am I still on? You can hear me, right? So I just wanted to say, just a plug for Partners in Policymaking. I'm a graduate 2014. It was really, an invaluable program for me. And I started that when my son was graduating and stepping out of entitlement. And it was really, really, you just learn so much, and it's absolutely it's invaluable. I think that anybody that has the time to devote to it should absolutely apply. Wanted to say that. The other thing, Just wanted to remind everybody that everything that we have here, we are going to have available in a virtual folder for this webinar. So, and of course, Colleen has said that you can go to the Boggs Center website to get this information. But everything that you see here, I think Kyoko is going to create a file for. So that's another thing. I just wanted to thank everybody. I'm going to turn it over to Gabrielle, who's doing closing remarks. Just wanted to, again, thank everybody for their time and you know, spending time with us on this lovely sunny day. We all should be outside, but I do appreciate it. And I'm going to turn closing remarks over to my to our Vice Chair, Gabrielle Bohon.
Hi, everybody. I want to echo what Eileen said. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and a special thank you to all our guest speakers, and especially to Kyoko Koko and Rebecca Nowensky, who have been doing a great job behind the scenes, getting us the questions and managing things, and of course, keeping us all on track. I hope you're able to use some of the tools that you learned about today. They'll be online in the virtual folder for the webinar. They are useful starting points to start conversations between family members and your case managers or support coordinators. Please visit the Regional Family Support Council's Facebook page that we have. The link is up there, as well as our website. Information will be available there on different resources that you can use. When our regional councils we have 10 of them, they cover the whole state. So you can go online. There was a map earlier showing which council covers your county. Our counselors are still having meetings, and hopefully we'll start off with our forums and our transition fairs and our informational sessions for you all to start attending again. So thank you very much for joining us this morning, and we hope to see you online or in person at our next statewide meeting. So have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye, Gabrielle.